We have Mr. Breaker,
Here.
Dr. Cross,
Present.
Dr. Kroll,
Present.
Mrs. Lehman,
Here.
Mr. Neely, Mr. Roth,
Present.
and Mr. Red.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't know the agenda print out right, but there we go. Now's the time set aside for audience presentation. If anybody would like to make a presentation to the board, now is the time. The Board of Education will answer by the end of the next regular Board of Education meeting. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Participants are expected to conduct themselves with civility and respect and follow the guidelines outlined in the board policy. Is there anyone here this evening who'd like to address the board? With that, we will move on to reports, starting with superintendent's report.
Okay, I'm going to begin my report with, on a somber note, we are grieving with the students and staff of Washington High School today over the loss of a 15-year-old Logan Smith through accidental drowning. I wanted the board to know that we have reached out to Washington High School to offer counseling services and assist them. And they've done the same for us in the past. And I just asking that everyone keep them in your thoughts and prayers as they go through that very difficult situation. And that student has touched even the lives of some of our own students and even staff here. So please keep them in your prayers. This week is hot. It's hot out there. So we've been dealing with that with our sports, PE, recess, practices, contests, and different things. I think I've kept you maybe a little informed as a board on what we're doing there. Our ADs are talking to coaches about ensuring water breaks and the length of practices. Some practices have been pulled indoors. Really the whole week's events have changed quite a bit for the junior high and high school in terms of changing practice times, moving some competitions, making them later. Maybe you've seen, there was a post from Jim Madsen, WEK-TV Sports, Beat the Heat, Morton football using the Tuesday morning lights for 6 a.m. practice. So our football team practiced at 6 a.m. today under the lights. So we're trying to make adjustments, and I just want to commend our athletic director, Scott Jones at the high school, and Scott Hammond at the junior high for just doing an outstanding job of navigating this and making sure that we meet IHSA guidelines. I didn't even know there were IHSA guidelines for heat and heat index, but there are. So we're just playing it day by day, monitoring the conditions and making decisions accordingly. Any questions about that from the board? Okay. Next, I want to talk a little bit about our Morton High School renovation project designs. We're on option 9 as it stands right now. And as we continue to move forward with this, I want to just confirm with the board that we are working under the understanding that we are going to do this project. That starting even this spring, we're going to start breaking ground or start the renovation process through the summer and into the next fall. So that's our plan. And we're making that commitment just in the sense that we're starting to expend, a great deal of funds on architectural designs, and that'll just continue to get more detailed and more expensive as we go along. So we're committed to that as a board, and of course, you're not really committed to anything until the day you approve bids, right? That's the day when the Board of Education actually approves a project. But up to that point, we're kind of approving some expenditures with our architects. In terms of the financing of the project, we can afford to do this project with fund balances that we currently have on hand and other funding sources that we're expecting to have this year. But we also know that this is not the only project that we've discussed in the near future. And we could not, and so some of those other projects, we've talked about early childhood education space, we've talked about Morton Academy space, we've talked about a second phase at the high school. We couldn't afford to do all those projects in the near future with just our fund balances. So that would require some borrowing either through working cash bonds or through a referendum. And so there's a lot of questions about, how much will we borrow and for how long and when would that start? So Ms. Kowalski and I are going to put all these pieces together and come back to you at the next meeting on September 5th with some options, plans, recommendations about how we might finance some potential projects that we've been discussing. So there's a lot of pieces to that, obviously, the timelines, what are those projects, what are the estimated costs of those projects, which some are going to be more ballpark figures than others. Also looking at the revenue side. So we know that we're going to talk about tonight, the sale of our property is about a $2.7 million piece to this potential revenue. So that's going to be a variable in this analysis. CPPRT, I shared with you, the corporate personal property replacement tax is estimated to be $3.1 million this year, which was more than we were kind of budgeting, although we were budgeting very conservatively for that. In reference to last year's amount was $4.3 million, great deal more that we were surprised by. The year prior to that was $3.8 million, so it's less than those two figures, but a great deal more than the years prior to that, which if you went back and looked at the history of that, you would see numbers like 1.3 million, 1.2 million, 1.6 or 7 million, never even hit 2 million until it hit 3.8 million. So we've seen this really sporadic jump in the CPPRT, and we were kind of waiting to see because that's money that we would certainly use for some of the projects we've discussed. So we've got the land sale, we've got CPPRT. We're still waiting some cost estimates on particularly phase 1 and phase 2 of what a high school renovation might be. Also rough figures on price per square foot of what general classroom construction might be if we added on to some of our elementary school buildings. So we're going to work on what would these project sizes be and what would our estimated cost be as we work toward that presentation. Another variable, each year we spend about $2 million in the summer on capital projects. I'll talk a little bit about in a minute about the committee, the facilities committee that always meets to kind of solidify those projects. But I can just tell you from looking at them right now, I think we're budgeting 2.1 million, so it's just a little bit over 2 million. But in that list of projects, there are some that we could defer to later. Nearly $1 million, we could say, let's wait on that project till the next year. None of that money would involve roofing. We would stay on schedule with our roofing. But so I'll come back to you later with those details, but I really want the facilities committee to chime in on that. So that'll be something that'll come down the road. So there's a little bit about our revenue and some of the funding that we might put toward these projects, but all of those, even millions of dollars, wouldn't add up to what all the projects would be. So we will work really hard to come up with a great recommendation, or at least options, with some of the variables that we have in place here, and we're going to present that at our next meeting. Okay? So everybody agree that we're moving forward with architectural designs, but ultimately the board will decide whether we are going to do a final project when it comes time to accept bids. Okay? All right, next I just want to review our superintendent committees that involve board members. Facilities committee, we're going to need a facilities committee meeting to solidify those projects that I just talked about. So what are we going to spend $2 million on? Are we only going to spend $1 million? What are those projects? I always like the board facilities committee to chime in on those before we completely solidify them, so that we all kind of know what are we doing in this next summer. I would say one thing on the plate that I feel like is not really a variable is the Jefferson tile project. And I can't wait for you to see that. We did one wing, all 3 floors of one wing of Jefferson. And I think Dr. Sander and I, we were there I think it was the very first day of school.
Oh, yeah.
Kids were coming out, they meet in the cafeteria downstairs. And as school starts, they walk up the stairs and go to the gym, and so they kind of come through the cafeteria. And as they were coming through onto the new tile, they just all looked down at the tile. They were just in amazement, like, am I in the right building here? So it was, even the littlest kids were just kind of amazed by the floor tile. So it does make a striking difference, and I really feel like the other wing is going to be a high priority for us in the next summer. Other than that, there are a few other projects that we could defer. So we'll talk about those details with the facilities committee meeting that will involve you two gentlemen in the somewhat near future. We'll schedule that. We'll also begin to look at our current buildings and where we might add on for some of the projects that we've talked about. We're going to start with our district office team on that. So a few of us at the district level are going to look at our properties along with Mr. Shook and our assistant superintendents and Ms. Kowalski. We're going to look at our buildings and say, okay, where could we put a wing on the buildings we have? And then we'll bring in the facilities committee as well and say, well, these are a few options that we would recommend, and kind of get your nod of approval or your input as well on that. So we've kind of gone away from the idea of a separate building outside of our property right now. I feel like renovation costs are so high, and doing that off-site may be cost prohibitive. So now we're really focusing on what can we do on our own school property. So that'll be a facilities committee agenda item. Finance committee, we just had a recent finance committee meeting on August 7th, which gave Ms. Kowalski and I great direction toward working toward the recommendations we're going to be making on September 5th. So I think we got great input from Dr. Cross and Mr. Breaker about what direction to head with that. So we'll take that advice and run with it. Policy committee met on August 9th and have some recommendations that are in the agenda tonight. We'll be doing a first reading of some of the recommended press updates tonight. Not a whole lot of excitement in those things, but really appreciate their service on that committee. Extracurricular mission committee. So Dr. Sander is heading that up. You want to give us an update on where you're at with that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We've got a meeting set. It is going to be next Tuesday, August 29th from 8, it's starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. Here's our goal. The task of the group is to look at the coaches' handbooks, both the high school and the junior high, and make sure they reflect our current philosophy, our role, our mission, and just general guidelines for the program. And so what we're looking to get out of that is making sure that both coaches' handbooks are consistent and that they serve as a guide for our coaches, our athletic directors, our administrators, and it's an expectation of, what our programs are all about here with Morton 709. And so we've got a full agenda. It'll probably take us a few meetings to get through everything, but we look to have a finished product that meets those goals.
Any questions about that committee? As the policy committee was reviewing policies, we came across ones that had to do with extracurricular activities, and we thought we should collect those up and maybe have that be a topic of conversation for that committee to look at all those extracurricular oriented policies and make sure they say what we want them to say or add to them where we'd like to add to them, so that we can kind of memorialize the work of the committee.
We're just focusing on athletics.
It's athletics and extracurricular activities. Mm-hmm.
Okay, the other committee that we haven't formed yet this year is negotiations committee. So this is a negotiations year. We typically have done that in the spring, February timeline. That involves 2 board members, unless you want to change the format of how we've done that in the past. And of course, it's usually a week-long event and requires a lot of availability. So I know Mr. Breaker will be assembling that as we go along here. The MEA has asked us, has wondered when might those dates be, so they can get those dates on their calendar. So I know it's only August. We've got some time to figure it out, but they are wondering, what kind of dates to put on their calendars.
When will that kind of take place?
It's typically
Historically, when does it take place?
like the first week of February or second week of February.
Is this something that we'll do during the business day or in the evening?
Recent history has been during the business day, but there's nothing that says that has to stay that way.
Could be hard to be on the committee and take a week off of work for negotiations.
I agree.
I was thinking the same.
But it'll be so much fun.
There's always between Christmas and.
Well, I mean, as long as you 10x my pay at work.
Free food
Yeah,
is the benefit. But yeah,
10x your board pay is what you're saying.
Yeah, 10x my board pay.
so yeah,
I'd do it for that.
so it's up to the board what you'd like to do in terms of that.
Yeah, it just makes it difficult, right? And I get it's like, well, I just wonder if there's efficiency in not like, doing the evening, not dragging out. Like, well, we have these 5 days to do it, to get it all figured out. It's like paying for subs and what's the hurry? It's like, well, for me, it'd be a hurry. Because it would be a week out of the office if it's all during the day, or if it's in the evening hours, then it makes it easier for me to be able to do it. So I don't know. I know recent history's been during the day. It's kind of prohibitive for me to be able to do it, even if I wanted to.
Okay.
So I don't know what you guys think. I mean,
Well, let's wait for you're not here for a meeting and we'll vote you in. It'll work out.
So it's a good point. It's something that the board will have to figure out in the next few weeks or so and figure out if that's a change we want to communicate to the MEA, that we're gonna go with evenings, then we need to start communicating that and prepare them for that.
just throwing it out there, because it'll be tough. It's peak illness season. Anyway.
A few things we do try to do to make things more efficient is we try to develop a list of topics well in advance and communicate them back and forth to both sides. Their topics to us and ours to them, which is another thing that the board can start to be thinking about. What might you want to include in that conversation? Of course, we'll talk more about that as we get closer. So we do try to do that. The other thing that has made it more efficient in recent years is our insurance through the cooperative, CIE, Central Illinois Educators Cooperative. Takes a lot of the decision-making out of, so it gives us a lot of purchasing power. We feel like we get a good situation in terms of financial situation from that, but it also takes some control out of our hands, unlike being self-funded for many years that we were, where all the variables are open for discussion. We don't have that anymore. So you could say that's good, you could say that's bad, but it's a fact that it does help speed up the process when it comes to negotiations.
In talking to the board president, I would highly encourage that we have the more experienced board members be on the negotiations committee. Just saying.
People over 2 years.
All right, any other questions or any comments about the committees or?
And we usually have a couple meetings prior to that, in close, we had discussions regarding expectations and goals and
Yes.
so.
We'll get the full input of the board, the full board when it comes to the topics for negotiations and what we'd like to see us do. And also we keep the full board comprised of how the process goes each night. There's communications that go out to the board of what was discussed and what was decided or tentatively decided as we go through that process. We try to maintain open lines of communication with the full board, even though the full board won't be sitting there.
To Dr. Cross's point, I agree that even the scheduling should be examined closely to make sure that it's as inclusive as possible so that the best qualified from the MEA and the board are available. So that's a good point, not thinking just from the board side, but we want everyone who wants to be at the table and is qualified to be there.
All right, well, let's certainly talk about that topic more as the weeks and months approach. That's all I have for my report. So I think I would shift to Dr. Teeter's presentation on our academic achievements.
Okay. So hopefully you had a chance to look at the slides. There's a whole lot to them. As we go along, if there's questions that you might have, please don't hesitate to slow me down and ask the question. As you're aware, we do have a number of standardized assessments. These are assessments that are professionally developed and therefore have a certain reliability and validity to them. And that's how they differ from the tests that we would write here. And as I'm sure you're also aware, as Dr. Smock has mentioned on many occasions, there are these soft skills that are so important for our kids that aren't measured on these tests. And so this presentation is just strictly looking at academic achievement as measured by standardized tests, but this is clearly not a full description of what it is our kids are learning and what it is that we are wanting them to leave us with the skill set of doing. And so you can see that the tests up here I have listed, the first 4 kids, IAR, ISA, and the PSAT suite are all a part of the state requirements, with the exception of 8th grade PSAT we give voluntarily because it's a nice tie between our junior high and our high school, but the other pieces are required. The kids assessment, quite honestly, we don't use much of. It is an observational assessment of our kindergarten students. The teachers submit observational data early in the year, and it just doesn't have much use for us. Our kids come to us pretty well prepared, so it's not a big thing for us. And quite honestly, we don't do a whole lot with the ISA, the Illinois Science Assessment. They haven't so far ever provided us with any summative data. It's always individual scores for each kid. So we have no way to determine, unless somebody was so motivated to go through the 750 copies and hand write down all the scores off each one of the student reports. We do pass them out to the students and send them home. So it is there. The time we get them back is so sporadic. Last year we got 2 years back within about a week apart. So I hope they're developing it to be better, but so far it just hasn't been much use. But obviously IAR is a valuable test for us. The PSAT suite is a valuable test. MAP is a test that we take voluntarily. It is a computer-generated test. It's a smart test. As kids get questions right, they get harder questions. As kids get questions wrong, they get easier questions, so it's adaptive. F&P benchmark is the in-person reading assessment we give our students. It's a one-on-one test with a teacher. It provides great insight to our teachers in terms of very explicit information as to where our kids struggle with reading. FastBridge we use for a couple different purposes. We use the ELA and math for progress monitoring. Bi-weekly is not, that's the most frequently we would use it, but quite honestly that doesn't even happen because of so many odd weeks in a school year, but it is a way that we monitor to make sure that our students that are in MTSS are making progress, and if not, then we adjust what we're doing to help them so that they do make more progress. And the last 2 are more SEL related. So those are the assessments, like I said, that are standardized, that are written by professional organizations. And then, of course, when we look at data, we look at it in multiple ways. One is attainment, where we use some type of standard or cut score to determine what percentage of our kids meet that cut score and what percent don't. So that's an attainment score. IAR, that is state set. The state sets that standardized score. MAP is based on the 50% likelihood of meeting the IRA cut score at the next grade level that a student would take it. That changes every 5 years, and the last time that score has changed was 2020. So the next change will be in 2025. A few things have happened since then, so that 50%, that cut score is going to be a little different, as you'll see here when we look at test data. And then the SAT College Board has a set standard score that they set as well. The other thing we look at is growth. Growth is kind of that equalizer, because while some students come to us with a whole lot of skills, some of our kindergarten students come to us reading while others are still trying to master the alphabet. Growth is pretty universal. All kids can and should grow, and so it is another way of looking at our test takers. IAR has begun reporting their growth as percentile ranks, which is way more meaningful than some of the earlier ways they reported it, so I appreciate that change. MAP is based on the national numbers, and what is a student that starts with this MAP score in the fall, what is the 50th percentile going to reach in the spring? And that again changes every 5 years, so our next time those numbers will be adjusted. And they don't change a whole lot anymore because millions and millions and millions of scores have gone into it. But that'll change again in 2025. SAT also bases theirs on the national numbers and what the expected growth should be from year to year. And then of course ECRA, which is a firm we use here in Illinois, develops some local norms for us to compare ourselves against ourselves. How are we doing compared to how we've done in the past? And so you'll see all of that data in what I'm about to show you. And then of course on a daily basis, which I won't show you any of this data, this is just typical daily is just the percentage of points possible. That's probably the most common way that we measure growth here internally. You have so many points and you get so many of those right. Whatever percent that is comes out to a grade here in the district. So the first graph I want to show you, I'm going to spend a little more time on it than the others, just because there's a couple of subtleties that I want you to notice. One of the things we've spent a lot of time talking about is, the pandemic's over. Last year was the first year we had I would say, fairly normal year, very normal year. A lot of the things that we've had to do in the previous, years to adapt to the pandemic, we didn't have to do last year, and that was nice. And so the way I was looking at the data, and the way I'll present the data, is are we returning back to normal academically? Not just how we interact here in school. And so on these graphs, that red bar represents the 2021 scores. And that would be kind of the divider between pre-pandemic, yeah. So to the left of that red bar, that black bar is 2018 and the gray bar is 2019. So those are our scores pre-pandemic. Red bar and to the right represents the score right after the pandemic. We didn't take any tests in 2020, so that represents the year after, and then 22 and 23. And so as you look at the attainment, and so this is using MAP's cut score, you can see in the third grade, not only are we not back to where we were pre-pandemic, but our scores seem to be going down. And I'm going to talk about that towards the end. I think there's a pretty good reason, not reason why, that we need to fix, not a good reason why we can't fix, but we just need to fix. But you look at fourth grade, and you can see that they are still below where they were pre-pandemic, but that they're not as far below. And you can see in fifth grade, 2021 was a hard year for fifth grade, but you can see they've come back up but not quite yet reached pre-pandemic levels. And for sixth grade, they are still down from the pandemic and haven't come back up much. So that's based on MAP's cut score. And remember, like I said, those scores, that cut score was developed in the last time it was normed was 2020, which a whole lot has changed since then. This is the same students, and everything represents the same thing, but this is measured based on IAR's cut score. And you can see in third grade, we still see from the red bar to the right that our scores are going down. We can see when you look at fourth grade, we actually have bars that are higher than pre-pandemic. You can see in fifth grade, we are slightly lower the first 2 years after the pandemic, but this past year we were up above pre-pandemic. In sixth grade, you can see this past year, we were up above pre-pandemic. In seventh grade, it depends on which part of pre-pandemic you're looking at, but if you're looking at the 2019 portion, we're slightly below pre-pandemic, and if you're looking at the 2018 portion, we're well above pre-pandemic. And the same thing for eighth grade. And again, it's the same students, same data, it's just based on the cut scores where we see differences. And so we do see some progress, according to IAR, since the pandemic, with obviously the exception being third grade, which I will come back to. This is our PSAT and SAT suite, and you can see that on these graphs, just kind of a reminder, obviously there was no tests in 2020, and then for some odd reason in 2021, the state of Illinois would not let us take the test even though we offered to pay for the test. So we actually are missing 2 years worth of data, which I have no idea what sense that made by the state for them to do that for us, but they did. With the exception of SAT, that's the only one we were allowed to give in 2021. And so the black and the gray bar on the left side of eighth grade are pre-pandemic, the black and gray bar on the right side for eighth grade are post-pandemic. So you can see we're very comparable, according to PSAT cut scores, pre and post-pandemic. For eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade, again, depends on the year. 2018, we're obviously lower. 2019, we're pretty close to our 2019 numbers. And for the SAT, which is 11th grade, you can see we are not quite back to where we were pre-pandemic, but we're above where we were that first year after. So these are all reading attainment scores. The other thing, and I know this is an explosion of colors, I almost was hesitant to put it on here. I don't do this much color ever in anything, so it's a little overwhelming. But the reason I put it on here is this is just looking at our percentile ranks, how we compare, and this is for MAP, against the nation in terms of where we are for each of our grade levels, kindergarten being the dark blue, first grade red, second grade is orange, and then can't see that color, maybe green, gosh, maybe another red. But you can see what I think is kind of interesting is that horizontal or that vertical line represents pandemic. That's where the pandemic happened. And you can see we're fairly clustered together above the 80th percentile on all of our grade levels until you hit the vertical line, and then it's like a bomb went off. And so there's a bit of a spread, but you can see even our lowest grade levels, which third grade is one of them as we were talking about, is still above the 70th percentile compared to other schools in the nation. So again, I try to use percentiles to maybe help frame, what do these percent meetings actually compare us to in terms of the nation. This is the PSAT percentile ranks. And so you can see that 11th grade is the line that runs all the way through there because that's the only one we were allowed to test all the way through there. Red is 9th grade, and you can see that our percentile ranks have gone down slightly, but are coming back up. And the same for 10th grade. It's down slightly, but coming back up. So. And then these are our reading growth effect sizes, and this is the stat that is calculated by ECRA. Again, quick reminder, green represents growth that is comparable to the past, how we've grown in the past. The range is typically negative 0.3 to positive 0.3 is green, and then anything larger typically than positive 0.3 is blue, which means above average growth for us, better than we normally grow. Anything from negative 0.3 down to about negative 0.6 is going to be yellow, which is being slightly lower than we've grown in the past, and anything red is significantly lower than we've grown in the past. And so you can see on this graph, there is a concern at 8th and 9th grade. I did reach out to ECRA because I do not understand how we actually have scores that are very favorable in the previous page you're looking at, and we're not that far off from previous years in 8th grade and 9th grade, and yet have a red dot. So I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that the test wasn't given for 2 years and the metric I don't know. But it is definitely, either way, something we need to watch and pay special close attention to. I just wanted to let you know I had talked to him to find out why that, because it doesn't seem to make sense to me that our scores haven't fallen tremendously in 8th and 9th grade, and yet that's a pretty significant lower than expected growth. So those are our reading scores, and then looking at our growth, and you can see in 5th grade we've had above average as measured on IAR, and above average in 11th grade as measured on PSAT. So those, and 1st grade on MAP. So those are some positive areas of growth we've seen. Okay, same pictures, but now for math. And you can see that now we have 3rd grade and 4th grade. That red bar representing the year after post-pandemic, and then everything to the right is after the pandemic. Those continue to go down, and that is a concern that we need to address. Oddly, you can see 5th grade, the pandemic was good for 5th grade. They're scoring higher than they have in the past. And 6th grade is not quite back to where they were pre-pandemic, but are closing in on that. When we look at the same students, but now looking at the IAR, we do still see a drop this past year in 3rd grade. Not much of a drop, and actually the previous 2 years were better years at post-pandemic. And again, we'll talk about that. 4th grade continues to go down. 5th grade goes up like we saw before and is actually better than pre-pandemic. And 6th grade is, this past year anyway, above pre-pandemic levels. 7th and 8th grade are both above pre-pandemic levels, depending on, again, which year, whether you choose 18 or 19. So we're back in the ballpark for those grades. When we look at, as measured by PSAT, we can see a slight decrease from pre-pandemic for 8th grade, for 9th grade, a larger decrease for 10th grade, and a slight decrease for 11th grade in terms of looking at pre-pandemic levels and post-pandemic levels. And this is as measured by PSAT and SAT on math. Again, looking at the percentile ranks, you can see that they were more spread out pre-pandemic than post-pandemic, unlike reading that was kind of clustered together. But we're still above the 70th percentile in terms of other schools that take the MAP test for each of our grade levels. You can see kindergarten, which would be the least affected by the pandemic because they're brand new kids every year, continues to be very high. Looking at the percentile ranks on PSAT, again, we're above the 60th percentile with the exception of 10th grade, which has gone down a little bit. And then looking at our growths, again, PSAT 8 and 9 is in the red, which is a concern that we will need to take a more significant look at. But ironically, 10th grade, which I believe is one of the lower ones on the PSAT, actually fell within the norm. So I do wonder about how those targets were calculated. On the positive side, we can see 1st grade again on MAP is doing well. 5th grade on IAR, 6th grade on IAR, and 7th grade on IAR. So there's some areas of improved growth in those areas. And then the last graph that I want to show you, and this is something that I had attended a workshop with ECRA because they were talking about IAR results, and those are so hard to communicate publicly because when you see 48% of your students met the growth, or met the target, it feels like if 48% met, 52% failed. And so it's really tough to smile and say, wow, we did really well, 48% met the target, and the community and the school board's looking at you like, what are you talking about? All of our kids should meet the target, and they should meet the target. So ECRA suggested you ought to take a look at the percentile ranks, which they calculate for us as a district compared to other school districts in the state. And you can see that we are, in terms of ELA, up towards the 90th some percentile. And in terms of math, we're just slightly below the 90th percentile. And so, when you compare us to other schools in the state, we are, that's a favorable comparison. And again, not to say that, well, we have nothing to worry about or nothing to look at. We do, but just, again, hopefully to put in perspective some of those 48% and 37%, what that means. So here's what our next steps are. And some of this we actually have already started. We met with principals, some of the principals this summer, and we took these numbers that are summative of the entire district and broke it down by building, by grade, by teacher, and have started having conversations with principals in terms of areas to look at, to focus on. Today, I met with our elementary coaches to talk about this issue in third grade. That third grade class last year was the class that was in kindergarten during 2020. So that means their first school experience, they missed half a year, and their second school experience in the first grade was in the midst of crazy. Kindergarten and first grade are incredibly foundational to students' learning. The stuff they learn in kindergarten and first grade is sets an incredible foundation for what they do later. And so, in my opinion, I believe that's why we see problems with that third grade class. And that doesn't mean, well, so sorry, too bad. It means we need to focus on fourth grade. Are we figuring out what holes need to be filled? And we need to be very explicit about that. And so I sat down with the coaches, I showed them this data, and I said, we need to dig in down to the student and start figuring out what skills these students are missing because of the crazy we've had for 2 years, and start getting that caught up and made up. I mean, they can't be the lost 2 years of school. And so, that's what I mean by breaking it down into smaller groups. The other thing that's not evident, because we always report data here as a district, you do see different trends. That trend that you see isn't universal across every teacher in the district or across every school in the district. Some of the places where you see grades go down as a whole, some schools we actually see it go up. Some teachers we actually see it go up. And so that's where we start to look at what exactly is going on differently there, what have they found that's been successful, and let's move that around and use that in other places. So that's one of the things that, like I said, we will continue to break it down into smaller groups, but we've already started. We've had conversations, like I said, with principals. I've talked with the coaches. We'll be meeting with teachers and just, what is it we can do to make sure that these kids get the help they need to get caught up. The second thing that we've been doing for the last few years, and that is really trying to focus on what it is our kids need to know and what it is they need to be able to do. It is very tempting as a teacher to get a textbook, outline that textbook, and teach it to the kids, and it's written by a professional. I've taught it. They should learn it. And we have been really trying to hit home with our teachers. What is it we want our kids to know and be able to do? What does that look like? Do we have a common understanding of what that looks like? And if we have a common understanding of what that looks like, are we expecting our kids to perform identically, whether you're in this elementary building or that elementary building or this LA9 class or a different LA9 class? The expectation should be the same. Over the years, we have teachers that year after year after year score really well on their MAP tests. I mean, their kids have a really high percentage of students making it. And when I've gone and talked to those teachers and looked into what is it you're doing in your class, because like year after year after year, you have 70%, 60% meeting their growth target, which, again, I know doesn't sound great, but it puts you in the 70th percentile in the nation. it's a pretty respectable score. Without exception, they're very standards driven. They can tell you exactly what it is they're wanting their kids to know and be able to do, and their kids know it. I mean, if I've sat and watched one of our best English teachers, and it is a great conversation as she explains to the kids, and the kids go through and dissect the standard. What is it we're supposed to be learning to do? And they gain an understanding. It's not a mystery. It's not like I've just told you a bunch of stuff. Now you figure out from this presentation what's important, because I'm going to test you tomorrow, see if you remembered. And it's really very intentional. So we've been working to expand that. Dr. Smock has talked about instructional efficiency as something we really need to focus on. We're very limited in time. And so standards focus is incredibly important for instructional efficiency. If we know what it is that's important that our kids know and can do, then that's what we need to focus on. And certainly there has to be other things, because school does have to be kind of fun at times, but it can't be all fun. Well, I suppose it could if you're really entertaining, but certainly more importantly is our kids are walking away with something of value, not just a smile and, man, I really love that teacher, they're funny as all get out. I don't know what they teach. We've talked about the 6th through 9th grade transitions, and that's something that we're intentionally looking at this year. And not only just academic transitions, which is what this presentation obviously is all about, but just even expectations. What is the expectation for students in 6th grade, behaviorally, homework-wise, responsibility-wise, and does that logically progress as you go from 6th to 7th to 8th to 9th? Because it is a quick turnaround, as we've said many times, to be a 6th grader to be a 9th grader. It's only a couple of years. You go from an elementary building to our high school, and that's just that's a big deal. And then, of course, the last thing, which is, again, something that Dr. Smock has emphasized numerous times is, in order for our kids to learn, they have to be able to learn. They have to be in a space where they can learn. And so helping our teachers recognize some of the SEL needs of our students is important, because if they are not ready to learn as a student, it doesn't matter how intentional you are about the standards, it's just not going to happen. And as an adult, if I'm not ready to teach, if I'm not managing my SEL real well, that's not good for our kids either. And so there is that focus that is supposed to complement our academics, not be in addition to. And then, of course, we have long been saying to our staff, you have to know your students as learners. And so we continue to focus on, getting our teachers to see, I'm not teaching this whole class this material. I'm teaching the whole class this material, but I know what each of you needs from this material in order to move to the next step. So some of you may already know this material, have it mastered. So here's some other things you should be doing so that you're not just sitting and waiting for the rest of the class to catch up to you. And here's some things that you may be missing. And this, again, is going to be really important for that kindergarten class of 2020. And even, we see some other areas where there's been dips. And as we've looked back and looked at the standards that would have been missed in 2020 and what grade a student would be in, it is very easy to understand why some of those grades are really struggling more than others, just because of some of the significance when something's introduced that's significant in the second semester of 2020 that didn't get introduced well. It creates ongoing problems. So we continue to try and focus on our individual kids, which ones have picked up on what they've missed and are doing fine, and which ones still haven't, and those that we need to fix. So with that, are there questions on any of the presentation?
I want to make a point. If you could go back, Dr. Teeter, to a slide where it has 5 years of data. It doesn't really matter what the test is, or just the bar graphs of 5 where it shows 5 years. Yeah, there. Okay. So when we talk about pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, so the year 20, the school year 1920, 2019, 2020, was actually 3/4 of a perfectly normal year that we don't have test scores for, right? So when we think of that's the starting point of the pandemic, is a bar that we don't even have up here, is a potentially perfectly normal year for some tests that are taken in March. We could have gotten those in, we might have had perfectly normal scores if we weren't, really things hadn't happened at that point. But then missing the entire last quarter, right? So there's really a gap in there. And then when you think about, okay, so what's post-pandemic? Well, the red bar is maybe the worst of the pandemic in some sense. because that was the year when we wore masks and quarantine, had high rates of student absence and faculty absences, and so we're kind of thinking in terms of, well, that's what's after the pandemic started, but it wasn't post-pandemic. Really, the only bar up there that's post-pandemic, isn't it the far right gray bar that we just lived last year, a very normal year, dealing with learning loss, and so the pandemic was a long time. It was a full 2 years of an experience for us that we were digging out of, and the whole nation has been digging out of the learning loss that's been experienced through this. So we're no different than that. So that was a great presentation, Dr. Teeter. Thank you for that. Does anybody have any other questions for Dr. Teeter? So we're being really intentional about looking at our test scores this year. That's something that was communicated to the faculty on our first day. Not that they've been a back burner, they really haven't. We've been looking at test scores through the whole pandemic and everything, but now we're really taking a concerted effort to get ourselves back to where we've been before. And our instructional coaches and Dr. Teeter are going to be very instrumental in working through that process.
One other thing I want to bring up, I think Dr. Smocks shared this with you. We have that dashboard on our website, which has a whole nother host of data. One of the things that when Dr. Hill was here that he was kind of insistent upon was looking at longitudinal data. All the data I've shown you is how does third grade do each year, how does fourth grade do each year, but there's a whole section on our dashboard that shows how the class of 2023 has done since 2015. And I this year changed it to the percentile rank of that average test score in that class and how that's progressed over the years. And so you can kind of see how our classes move through time from the third grade to the fourth grade to the fifth grade to the sixth grade based on a percentile rank. So there's that data, and then there's also some attainment data that's on there as well. So
That's what I'm trying to process, because on the left-hand side, the black bar becomes the third grade, becomes the gray bar on fourth grade, and then it becomes the black bar again on fifth grade, because it skips, it becomes a red bar on sixth grade, right, or whatever.
yeah,
And so there's,
yeah,
trying to process that,
it's easier to process on, well, it's not easier, but you can do it easier on the longitudinal studies of the graduating classes.
You've got the river on the
That's on the ECRA data that I didn't show you, but don't worry. Eventually the state's gonna officially post our IAR scores, and that thing is coming out, you're gonna get to see the river again.
like the river.
Okay,
I have a couple of thoughts
Sure.
on this. One is just how many years it really takes to get a good trend. And this is making me think of some of the other developments as far as how quickly we as a district now are committed to teachers for tenure and performance data and looking at buildings performance data, and just as a statistician, you know, the more data points the better, and it's hard to get those data points in that shorter amount of time. So that's something that definitely is going to make our administration's job different, and they'll have to rise to that challenge as to, besides these scores that really are annual or biannual, how else can we achieve or continue our standard of excellence to get the kind of kindergarten and first grade teachers that are at the 90th percentile, and then children not in those classrooms struggle for a couple of years later. That's, I mean, there's this challenge, but then also this just, I'm so proud of our elementary teachers and just seeing what a neat foundation and how important those classes are to our students. You can see the students that were in kindergarten, first, second, rode out the pandemic much better, or at least it appears according to your data. Am I interpreting that correctly?
in some cases, yes. I mean, there's some, I think, I might misspeak, but it seemed like there was something that happens in fourth grade that was pretty significant, and so you would see some, what was it, third grade? I don't know, it really does depend on when standards are introduced. Like if it's the first year you've ever done fractions, and that's a part that got messed up through the pandemic, that's a really tough concept for students. So to try and do what you're supposed to do with fractions the following year when you really didn't get a very good introduction to fractions, that's where we've seen a lot of issues and needing a lot of supplemental help to get our students understanding fractions.
So this data also highlighted the most important standards for our students.
Correct, the IAR test, and the MAP test, and allegedly the PSAT tests are all aligned to the standards that we teach.
Thanks.
Go back to like the first set of paragraphs.
For
Second,
reading?
towards the front. So like right here, just take that for example, you said that the measure, the yardstick changed in 2020.
No, well, if I did, I didn't mean to. What I meant to say in 2020 was that's where the division is between pre-pandemic and post-pandemic.
Okay, I thought you said every 5 years they changed the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they changed the map is renormed every 5 years. Yes.
So in 2020, you get a new set of
Which is based,
expectations.
which is based on, right, 2015 through 20, yeah.
So with the expectations changing, everybody's score could go up or down, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Because we're basically saying, if used to be a foot was 12 inches, now we're saying it's 11 inches or 13 inches or whatever.
Yeah. And to Dr. Smock's point, and actually to your point, Dr. Kroll, it takes a while to develop trend data. We haven't been IAR for as long as I have graphs up here. I mean, I didn't go back any other than 2015 because we were using ACT before PSAT, and that is a whole different, they have a whole different set of cut scores. And so I know IAR has renormed when they went from PSAT to IAR, and before that they were SAT. And so to your point, it is like taking a ruler and saying, oh, well, now this is a foot. Now who makes that? Oh, no, now this is a foot. Who makes that? So
This is why we prefer percentile ranking, to look at all this data. Percentile ranking tells you it's like running a race. What place are you in? Regardless of the terrain, what happens to you and everybody else, what place are you in? And are you staying in that place? Or are other people passing you? Are you passing others? And to me, that takes out all of the cut score questions of why we have such low meets and exceeds, but yet we're at the 80th or 90th percentile. It takes out all the cut score anomalies and the changes that they do in these scores. It's just what place are we in this race? So to me, that's the great equalizer and why we've converted all of our statistics, I think, pretty much most of our testing statistics on our dashboard into percentile ranking comparisons.
for the longitudinal, yes, that's why we.
This makes more sense to me.
Well, it does, I mean, cause everybody went through the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and so they went through it like if they did it better than us, then
Then
they
passed
should have
us.
passed us in percentile,
Right.
they have more attained. And so I agree, like, cause you could arbitrarily change a cut score, right?
And we deal with that constantly.
Yeah. And so it doesn't like, well, how are you attaining versus everyone else? I agree, but the percentiles matter. Right?
And I don't necessarily look at third, fourth, fifth, sixth. I look at third to black, fourth to gray, and then sixth to red to see that more than
with you, yeah.
third, fourth, fifth, sixth.
Are
Because
we
now
doing-
you're actually looking at an actual,
A cohort of students going
Yes.
through our system.
yes.
Like, did we make them worse from third to sixth grade, or did we make them better?
Do they tend to be a low group consistently or a high group consistently? So yeah, you can definitely slice it that way and get a lot more information. Okay, thank you, Dr. Teeter. I have just a few more things in my report, then I'll turn it over to Mr. Breaker. So we started serving school lunches in our own program. And so far, even though it's just been just a few days of that, we've gotten really good feedback. People email and said a few things, and I know Dr. Sander, you've been tracking on some of this. What are some of the things we've been hearing?
Okay, so I've got a few comments. So from Jefferson School, Miss Wyman, she said that the menu items have been just, the options have been great. They've been appealing to her eye, and she said that they've been delicious and have had unique meal options. Mr. Saunders just reported out on how he called them the Grundy Gator Galley Gals. Just rock it. I mean, that they've been working together as a team, that the food presentation has been good and the options have been great. From the junior high, the feedback from the students was that the food quality is better this year. One comment was the pizza was really good. And then my favorite, save the best for last, is at Lincoln. Mrs. Horsham said that the lunches have been awesome. She thinks that their participation numbers have been higher. So I talked to Crystal today. I said, we'll let you get in a couple weeks and I'll start asking to track, who's participating in the school lunches. But she said that they love the grapes, the chicken hoops, and then they had something on their menu called Zoo Nuggets, were an absolutely huge hit. They sold out of them. So I think from several districts, they've really appreciated that. Yeah, Zoo Nuggets. Who would ever think that you could form chicken into zoo animals? But the salads overall, the fresh fruit and the salads have been a huge improvement. So.
I have a question.
Yes.
Unless you're not done, or if you're not done, you just keep going.
Well, I will say this, we are still looking for 3 positions, so I'll use this as an opportunity. We have a food service worker position that's open at the high school. We have a cashier at the junior high, and we have a food service worker that floats between all of the buildings based off of need. So if you know someone that is interested in joining this outstanding crew, let me know. Let them know, and we've got applications that they can complete, so.
Junior high specifically, of course, my kid's in junior high. You get one, whatever, and one, whatever, and then I got a couple parents ask me the same thing. It's not enough. So they were asking, A, they get something bigger, and B, if there's more a la carte items, because I don't know if there's a chicken sandwich is what I think she said, or cheeseburger or something that they could get a la carte in addition to their meal that's too dinky for growing seventh graders specifically.
Okay.
Does that make any sense? And I can't remember what the one thing was.
It sure does, and if you remember what that is, shoot me an email on that, and I'll find out that information.
I will definitely do that.
I will say this, portion control or the food size, that's all governed by, how many ounces of whatever it is that we can serve. I know that that's an issue at the high school. You have some kids that are playing sports and they're burning 2,000 plus calories a day, and when they go through the lunch line, and if they were to get the traditional lunch, they look at it and go, really? I mean, this is like an appetizer.
And that's exactly what it was, the traditional 239 or whatever, traditional lunch. They were still starving, including my son. He says, I'm hungry, so.
Well, and the kids are growing at the junior high age. You can hardly keep them fed. So I will find that out, and especially the a la carte items that are out there, what they have available.
Thank you.
Yep.
On the first day, I wandered into the Lincoln kitchen, and they're very experienced food service workers there. They've been there for literal decades, and they were really excited about the food quality they were seeing come through. I saw a bunch of peppers. I didn't even know kids ate peppers at the grade school level, but they were excited about they were fresh foods. And one thing that one of them said is, well, it takes more time now to prepare real food. So to prepare fresh food, they had to slice all that up. And so that's one of the things they did say is like, this is great, very positive about it. But now we are spending more time in the preparation side because it takes time to prepare food that's this good. So it's a good problem to have. And we're gonna be monitoring this as we go along. We're gonna be getting feedback from people. We're gonna be making adjustments. We have we don't have a great idea where we're at financially on some of these things. We will be monitoring that though through the year, so we'll start to see, okay, how are we doing budget-wise on this with the changes we've made? We hope, we're optimistic, you know, we've been paying a for-profit company to do this. Now we're taking that profit piece out of it and looking to break even as a school district. We hope there's room in there for the quality to get to where it needs to be and for us to break even with it. So we'll be looking at that as the year goes on and making adjustments according to feedback that we're getting also.
And the quality is much better than previous years from people that I talked to.
Okay, that's
So
good.
I did want to say that as well.
Just need the quantity, is what you're saying.
All right. I think if you're reading between the lines towards the end of the year, the portions may really get small.
Spaghetti.
So we'll keep you informed as we go along, but thank you for that feedback. Upcoming presentations, so 6-day enrollment, today is day 5, in case you're keeping track and you're on the edge of your seat about our enrollment. But tomorrow's day 6, I believe. So next meeting will be a presentation on our 6-day enrollment from Dr. Sander. He'll have all the stats, he'll have Cropper predictions and see what the over and under is on Cropper, how good a job they did. I think numbers are up, but especially at the high school, it feels like. So we'll get the official numbers at our next board meeting. Advanced placement score is another presentation we're gonna do. Our scores from last spring are gonna be presented by Mrs. Ripka at our next meeting. So you'll get to see what I think is some very good news about our advanced placement scores. So that's a couple presentations. There's probably others, but those were ones on my mind. And the last thing I have is I just want to commend our custodial maintenance staff and our grounds crew for what I feel is the best condition our buildings have looked inside and out for the start of school that I've ever seen. Even not even looking for it, it just jumped out at me, just driving, you know, from place to place right at the start of school, just looking at our grounds. I think they've just done a fantastic job of getting things just immaculate before school started. And if you walk through our halls, you know, in the middle of the summer, you wouldn't have thought that was possible. So they've just done a phenomenal job. So we've had a great start to school, a lot of positivity in the air, and we hope to continue that. So that is my report for today.
Thank you. Any questions for him? There's not. Under the president's report, just a couple things. I think everybody's got a note card in their folder for the IASB meeting October 4th for the Central Illinois Valley is in Pekin. So if you'd like to attend, let Valerie know. Then also just a look ahead, typically some of the admin team serves at the Pumpkin Festival tent on Thursday night, September 14th, from 4 to 7. So if you're available for that, let Valerie know that as well. So.
And are you looking for an hour, 3 hours? What are you looking for? I can't remember what the email
The
said.
shift is 4 to 7.
I think it's 4 to 7 is when we start.
I'd say do whatever you can do. And
Yes, if you can't, just let me know.
That, any items for agenda building or any board members have comments?
Just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, just because we have committees, specifically our committee, we don't make any final decisions. The whole board has to make the decision. And I've said it before, I'm gonna say it again, just to make sure that you all are aware, we won't make any decisions without the board.
I think it's true of all the committees, right? I mean,
Yes.
same thing, I mean, facilities is a big one because of the dollars involved with it, and then that stems to finance, it's kind of the same way, it's like, we have our opinions of what we want, but we're not the final say, that's true. Let's try to breed efficiency, right?
Yes.
It's an attempt to breed efficiency, I'm not saying it always does, but
No, and I think I like this because I don't want to have to talk about everything at these because we just don't have time. And that's why we have the committees. And I do want to say one more thing, thanks to Amanda, because of most of the stuff that I hear is already vetted through Amanda from sporting events. So, I don't know if you're all aware, but a manicure is the majority of sporting stuff.
I take that one for the team.
Yes, on that same vein, just at our superintendent's policy committee, we had a similar discussion in that there are so many policies, and it is a recommendation that every 5 years, each policy be reviewed, even if there are no changes. And so, you know, in that meeting, we were discussing, well, how can we as a board do that without having to spend time here in the big committee going through those? And so what we have presented this time are just the ones that actually have text changes. Many times the policies have been updated because they've been tried again in court, and a newer or more recent ruling still supports the exact same school board policy. So when you see the ones that are just listed in the consent agenda, those are the ones that we did not really have any discussion on. And then, of course, the ones that are in your packet are the ones that are different, and we'll try to make recommendations if there's anything exciting for you. I really should not enjoy all the legalese as much as I do, but thankfully Dr. Smock joins my enthusiasm, and we just enjoy those meetings.
It's great.
Speaking of taking one for the team.
I forgot to pass
And
something
that
out.
goes along, if anybody has comments to committee members prior to the meeting or whatever, they can definitely weigh in and give an opinion, so. Oh. So with that, we will move on to discussion items. The first item is discuss the final fiscal year 24 budget.
Here, let's pass it.
Well, the budget was presented,
Yes, it was, yeah.
and since that time, are there any questions for Ms. Kowalski about the budget? No questions? Okay.
Thank you. The next item is to discuss the first reading of policy updates from issue 112. Reading that.
So in the pack, you should have received kind of a synopsis of those policies. Ones that were just being referred to, actually. So this is the first reading, and you may not have had a chance to sift through all of these things. But Valerie did some nice highlighting for us. Valerie, you want to explain the highlighting on the
Sure.
policy?
As Dr. Kroll had mentioned, a lot of it's just like green, it's legal stuff, so those are really kind of no-brainers, that unless, if we want to follow the law, and have the most updated references, which I think we do, there's not a whole lot to vote on with those there. And then the ones that we thought, you'll see some yellow, and that just one especially that we thought might be some discussion. That particular policy, we had omitted some language previously, language that press had suggested for us. And I think that we did it out of compassion and wanting to like do the best that we can for our families. But I think with some legal things that have changed, it might be wise for us to put that language back in. And I think I put also in paper form so you could kind of look at what we have and the difference. So that's kind of the major one. And the other one with some yellow, I think, is just kind of looking at like extracurricular, like you'd spoken earlier, that we're gonna definitely include our extracurricular superintendent committee in that. Make sense?
So maybe the best approach is to give you a chance to look at these. If you have questions, feel free to email me and I'll share those emails with the policy committee and talk through those or bring them back for discussion before we, as we go to approve these, the next meeting, there'll be a discussion phase to these and we can answer even more questions. But if you have questions along the way, feel free to email us. I'll definitely share those emails with the policy committee and move forward. But we always have a first reading, give you a chance to digest them, and then before an approval. Any questions at this point, though? I know they may be, right, you may not have had a chance to review them in advance, so I understand that.
That, we'll move on to action items. The first item is to approve the construction bids for the district office. Accept the motion to approve.
I move the Board of Education accept the base bid for the business office renovations by Bishop Brothers.
No, support.
Any discussion?
Dr. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
Mr. Breaker,
Yes.
Dr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
and Mr. Roth.
Yes.
Next item is a motion to approve the 2023-24 handbook revisions. We have a motion to approve.
I move that the board approve the, I just lost what it is we're approving. The handbook revisions. I'll second that.
Thanks.
Discussion on that?
Okay.
Read those three together.
Dr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
Mr. Neely, Mr. Roth,
Yes.
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
Mr. Breaker,
Yes.
and Dr. Cross.
Yes. That's great.
A to E, hey, it's all good.
He's doing his own thing. It's fine.
We're getting through this.
Actually, I'm looking, the one I'm looking at online, must be looking at the old one. That was B at one time.
You're right. You're right, Mr.
We
Breaker.
had it, you are correct. We had it twice.
We had a repeat item on that
So,
previous
Sorry.
agenda.
yes, we're gonna do that twice. We're gonna come back to it. So
I'm
Make
not
sure you guys
making the
refer.
next motion.
Sorry.
that's B and F on here, yes.
Yes. Keeping us awake.
Is everybody done picking on me about it, or any further? We're gonna move on?
It's not your fault.
Never
Well,
is.
it so is.
The next item is approve a resolution allowing for the intervention regarding assessment of property, the Hopkins property. Accept the motion.
I move the Board of Education approve the resolution allowing for the intervention regarding the assessment of Hopkins property.
Support.
Discussion?
Dr. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Roth,
Yes.
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
Dr. Kroll,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lehman.
Yes.
The next item is to approve the resolution allowing for the intervention regarding the assessment of property, the Matt Court property.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution allowing for the intervention regarding the assessment of the Matt Court property.
Support.
Discussion?
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
Dr. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Roth,
Yes.
Mr. Breaker,
Yes.
Dr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
The next item is to approve the resolution for allowing for intervention regarding the assessment of the Tiber property.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution allowing for the intervention regarding the assessment of the Tiber property.
Support.
Mr. Roth,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
Mr. Breaker,
Yes.
Dr. Cross,
Yes.
and Dr. Crawl.
Yes.
Do you want to do handbook again? It'll be good.
I think we are good.
The next item is approve a resolution for the sale of district property.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution to proceed with the sale of the district-owned farm ground on 4th Street.
Support.
Dr. Mike, you want to jump in on the timeline of that?
Sure. So with approval of this, we'll set in motion 3 weeks of giving public notice with a lot of detail about a lot of the provisions of the property. And if I haven't already shared some of those other documents with you, I certainly will. And so it'll set that all in motion. We'll start to publicize this. We'll set the bidding date, the sealed bid date. I believe we were looking at September 29th with an award or finalize process on the following Monday, October 2nd. So it's about a month-long process to get those notices out, collect sealed bids, open those bids, and then award it to the highest bidder. Our minimum bid that we have publicized is $22,000 per acre. And we're putting that'll be in as a part of the published notice.
Any other questions or discussion?
Okay, let's do this. Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
Dr. Cross,
Yes.
Dr. Crawl,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
Mr. Roth,
Yes.
and Mr. Breaker.
Yes. On the consent agenda, we'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Support.
Dr. Cross,
Yes.
Dr. Crawl,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
Mr. Roth,
Yes.
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
and Mr. Breaker.
Yes. There will be no closed session this evening, so we'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
1, 2.
Is that 2 in a row?
2 in a row. It's never happened.
That's just crazy, isn't it? All right. Hang on. All right, so, Dr. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
and voice vote?
Forward.
Voice vote to adjourn, is that right?
Aye.
Okay. Wow.
Thank you, thank you.